Welcome back to the Raven Chronicles with Moonin and Hugan. Thank you for joining us. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about the support or lack thereof coming from your employer or from your insurance provider when it comes to falling mentally ill at work. So stay tuned and thank you for joining us.
All right, welcome back. So it is
Welcome
quite
back.
interesting, right? Because we always chat, you and I, 20 some minutes prior. We text the day prior, we text the day of regarding what we're going to talk about. And
You show me
usually,
pictures of your underwear, that kind of stuff.
yes, but that's the next episode. In
Oh
my
yeah, that's
case,
right. Sorry.
since I'm French,
Spoiler alert.
it, it- that's going to be on the website. Uh, but yeah, no. So it's extremely interesting, and we wanted to touch base with what's going on with the service, what's going on with our insurance provider, and so on and so forth. Because sadly, I mean, breaking an arm, breaking a leg, cutting an arm off, or it is awful, right? Those we're not here to diminish those injuries because we're not going to talk about them. This is not what we're going to talk about. It might be a result of what we're going to talk of, right? But so it's not on the subject, but the mental health injuries that we're talking about is more when it's time to talk to someone who's not even prepared to deal with someone who's totally off the wagon, right? And I believe that when you hit the wall of either PTSD, depression, and so on and so forth, the wall hit and it hit hard. And,
Yeah, big
and
time.
yeah, and I mean, I've seen that. You've seen this. I've seen that to other people, um, and then nobody talks about it, right? Like,
Mhm.
let's not talk about that person. He's crazy, or how can you believe like he went to that call and now he cannot work, like he took a week off, right? And that's kind of, and I'm gonna throw that at the beginning, but that's kind of what we hear, right? So the stigma is extremely present in between people, and it might be an old mentality, but you still if we keep on going with that mentality, the new kids who are joining the job now will have the same mentality. So this is
Mhm.
why we're talking about it today. So before we jump on it, please subscribe, like, share, so we are known around the world. No, I'm kidding, but just so people needs to
So
hear.
we can be famous.
Joe Rogan, here might come. No,
I
but
mean, no.
no, seriously, we're not there for the big name. We're there for the people who actually struggle, who wants to actually hear about it, who have so many questions. And I mean, we usually all have kind of similar question. We
Mm,
all go through that question mark in your forehead, like what am I going to become, when can I go back to work, when I'm going to be fixed, and why is this? It's because if you have a broken legs, you know that roughly 3 months everything is going to be healed up, and you're going to have a cast with signature of people on it if you're liked by people. But the other part with this is mental health is not like this. You
yep.
and I can have PTSD, and 2 years from now you're fully healed. 9 years from now I'm still in the same process. Now, there's obviously reasons for that coming up to a certain length of time, but there's also stigma that comes with it because beside you doing the work at work, the co-workers, the friends, the family, and the people starting to be sick of seeing seeing you sick, should I say? So I have an S for me. Um, will maybe like, it will bring up a compassion fatigue, right? It will
Yeah.
bring up like, are you done being sick? I'm sick of hearing it, right? And I don't think that the person is sick to bring attention to themselves or have pity or whatnot. There's something that is not working properly with them, and I'm not saying that it is a negative way. Usually, it's a chemical imbalance that depression brings up, PTSD brings up, and so on and so forth. This is why we have medication and so on and so forth. But when it comes to opening ourselves, being vulnerable, and being heard, because I think it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And if the person on the other end is not welcoming that, it can shut you down for a long time.
Yeah, big time. And
So,
that's what I I have advocated and spoken about this at length, John, and I think you have too.
Yep.
When we're talking about support, and I think what you're aiming at is there seems to be a massive lack of support at that level in the employment um, field. I'm looking at I'm lacking the right word. Maybe I'll put it this way: there is no support, or there seems to be very little support at the level of the employee.
Yeah.
Whereas the employer will have all kinds of support things in place. And I'll use my employer, the OPP, for example.
Yeah.
The OPP is well known for doing really good police work. And the OPP has wonderful support programs in place, and they have um, training courses, both online and in person, that we do as police officers,
Hmm.
uniform and civilian, all go through the training for mental health readiness. And there are peer support groups, and there are trauma support groups, and then there are debriefs that we do after traumatic incidents, and that it's all great. It's
Hmm.
all wonderful stuff. And then when deputy commissioners go online and go live, they say that we have mental health problems under control. We have all of these wonderful things in place, and they do. But that's kind of the end of the road,
Yeah.
because you can have all of that awesome support in place, but if your brothers and sisters in the uniform that you rub shoulders with every day, that you sit in the cruiser with every day, that you go to calls with, that you back up, that you support and that support you, when they don't have your back, that's where the support is missing. And that's where the trauma is exacerbated, because those are the people that are supposed to back you up. And they'll back you up when there's a gun pointed at your face or when you're fighting somebody with a knife, but they won't back you up when you say you're not feeling well, when you say you're mentally ill. And that has been something I have been advocating for. And like I said at the beginning of this, something that I really truly believe is the number one thing lacking for support within the employer is not the employer itself, it's the staff that you work with. Because the employer is just an entity, right, John? The employer is just it's just the body. It's the thing that you call the service you work for. It's the thing that you it's the name of the organization, but it's not the people. And it's the people that are harming one another. And I've heard this now from so many police officers from around Canada and the United States that I know it to be true. That when you're the one who becomes mentally unwell, you'd have been better off being shot or having your leg amputated. Like you said, it's better to be hurt physically than it is to be hurt mentally, because people get that, but they still don't get the mental health aspect. And they don't understand that the support that is needed for people who are mentally unwell is just to accept that this is what happened to us or
Hmm.
someone, and that all they need is support. All you need to do is understand that this is what's going on and treat it like they're healing from any other form of illness or disease or injury that could occur because of work. And that's what I hear when you're talking loud and true. And it's one of the things that I have always thought was the biggest missing piece to this, in that in the employer space, it's not the employer, but the employees that are the place where support's lacking. John, what do you
The
think?
so I find, okay, so there's a various way. Okay. And I think there's prejudice that we see often from in between officers, or in between military, or in between first responder in general. Now, we talked about that last episode, but the statistic says that first responder will have usually 800% more exposure to trauma than a regular person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Joe Smith working. Um, so that's humongous. So obviously, traumas, there's some that you're going to sleep with, there's some that you will not. They will remain very alive. So let's go with that, number one. Number two, when we're looking at the employer itself, and this is where personally I have issues, and I love it because we have kind of different views on this. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I did two uniform. I've done two uniform. Now the road to mental readiness that you talked a bit about earlier, which is R2MR,
Mm-hmm.
a course that was created by the military at first called Suicide Awareness. It's an afternoon course where we sat and we look into the eyes of each other and say, "Do you want to kill yourself? Are you red, blue, purple, green, yellow?" color that you are today. If you're black, it's not a good day. You know what I mean? On the color schemes that they're showing us on the PowerPoint, right? And death by
Yeah.
PowerPoint was kind of a fact. So that to me is a check in the box for insurance.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah.
That's it, right? As same as it's a check in the box for you to do your firearm test, right? So if tomorrow you have to go shoot someone, you know how it goes, right? You don't shoot all around and so on and so forth. So that check in the box exists for this. The service I worked, we had psych services as well with it. We had people who dealt with trauma and so on and so forth, right? So directly, they don't have to hire outside of the box. And then and then that's kind of how it works, right? So we had as well a nice setup. It's a smaller service, right? We're 2,000 officer working there
Yeah.
versus OPP, I think in 10 some thousand people. If I
Yeah. It's
remember.
over 10,000 now, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So now it remains the suicide level for the past 5 years and the policing world is quite high, right? And that we're not talking about the murders, right? The cops who've been killed. So there's something that is not done properly. Now, what is it, right? Um, if we are looking from I do believe that the poop is coming from the top of the pyramids. So if from the top of the hill, it's treated as with prejudice or with stigma, while at the bottom it will be treated the same way. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a group and your sergeant is thinking that, I don't know, every mental illness is for weak people, weak-minded, well, the rest of the crew will follow suit,
Yeah.
right? So, and I've seen it. I've seen how other people can be treated and so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to go, and here we're talking about our own experience as well. So we're not the professional and we're not statistically talking. It's always about us here, what we've been through. I tasted the two ways. One way, which is just police service and the military side of services. Out of the police service, I think there's 3 person who still reach out here and there to me and say like, yeah, you're doing a good job and yada yada. Um, Out of the military service, I have a humongous pack of people who are all talking about it. And yes, we've been there and we're checking in and so on. And it doesn't matter where the hell they live. Some are in Texas, some are in Mexico, some are overseas, some lives in the same town as I do. It does not matter. We're
Yeah.
brothers, we're served. That's it. That's all. And the support is very, very there because in between us, we understand that kind of difficulties, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Even,
Well, it's sorry, John, I'm cutting you off, but I
no, no,
mean,
no.
I've heard this so many times. You're not the first person. I know a lot of people now that have both military and police careers under their belt, and they
Yeah.
all say the same thing as you, that there's a massive dichotomy
Mhm.
where in the military, your brothers and sisters are always supporting you, whether you're on or off duty.
Mhm.
Whereas in the policing world, it's completely different. It's just a dog eat dog kind of cutthroat place. And if you find yourself at the bottom of that barrel, if you find yourself as the person who's mentally unwell, guess what? You're going for a ride and you're not going to enjoy that ride.
Oh,
And
no. Yeah.
I mean, for me, that's the thing I can't speak any more of. Maybe I'm biased because I suffered, or I still do suffer at the hands of some behind the scenes bullying. And I mean, it doesn't affect me anymore because I'm not even around. I just hear it vicariously through a few other officers that I deal with. But the reality of this is, John, I work with our detachment has about 60 members.
Mhm.
And we do a massive geographical area, and we're a very close knit little community. And I like to think that I wasn't a complete a hole when I worked.
Mhm.
Maybe I was. I don't know. But nobody reaches out. Nobody ever has. And then I talk to people that are my military brothers and sisters that are friends of mine, and it's the exact opposite, like you just said. So what's the difference there? What is it that is so different about policing in the military? Um, and
It's
I think
it's
it's
easy.
I think it's because you guys are so much more together all the time that you're never apart, and maybe the stakes are a little bit higher when operation actually kicks in. It's more life or death all the time, whereas policing is more about dealing with everybody's psychological traumas in their life more often, where there's a lot less of that. We might die today, so we have to have each other's back in every single way. It's almost more competitive in the policing world, with the specialty units and with the ranking system. And I don't know. I really am lost, John. I don't know if maybe you can shed some light on this. I seem to be lost in why in the policing world we can't have that same camaraderie as it is in the military world.
So I think there's a various thing, right? So all those promotion works. And I mean, don't get me wrong. When you're in the military, I remember talking against promotion because I was like, this is not making sense. They are biased and so on and so forth. Then I saw the policing while how it works, and I was like, this is insane. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was shocked, my friend. You need to know the people work there. You're gonna be hired that specialty unit. And I'm like,
Yep.
this is not how it should work. You should. It's like saying, well, Peter is gonna be the new pilot on my plane because I like Peter. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the best pilot is Jack. I want the best pilot. As a client sitting on that plane, I don't care about the guy who's known. I want the best pilot who's going to be able to land it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So personally, in that case, I was very shocked of it. Now the military is a bit more black and white, but if we go even back further to boot camp or the police training that we have at first, which how long is the police training for OPP roughly?
It was about 4 months.
Okay, so Calgary Police, it's 7.
7 months. Wow.
It's one of the longest in the country.
Yeah.
Because I know RCMP is 5, if I remember correctly. And you do 8 to 4 or 8 to 5 or roughly 10 hours. If you have a 10 hours, then you go home,
Yep.
right? You go to, in your case, you go to Ontario Police College, correct?
Yep.
Something like that, OPC. And I think you're away for what, 2 months?
So the way it is it's 3 months at the Ontario Police College, and then most police services do like an additional 1 to 2 months of their own personal training back at their general headquarters.
Okay.
So the OPP does about 2 months
Aurelia.
now. Yeah,
Okay.
in Aurelia. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, and in your case, well, obviously your family's away, right? Because you're all the way up north.
Yep.
So obviously you're staying there with the people around. But if you live in the JTA area, you go home. Or even if you live in Ottawa, you do a drive of 5 hours, go home. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
change, right? So you're back into your comfort zone, right? And let's go with
Yep.
this. Even and RCMP is the closest to the military that we have in Canada, police wise. Okay.
Yeah.
For us, I remember my dad dropping me off at 19 years old and say, "Is that the green door it says on the paper?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, it seems like it. It's the only green door I can see." And and my dad's like, "Do you want me to walk you up there?" I was like, "Nope, not gonna be a weak little man today. I'm going to
And this, are you
military."
talking about when you were joining the military?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So because I didn't have cars at that time, I was back from Brazil, and I mean, life was just restarting, and so I walked up on my little 2 bags and carry-ons and whatnot, and the show started there, right?
But
Yelling
then,
and whatnot.
but you found a brotherhood. That's the thing, right? You
But you have
found
no
a
choice.
brotherhood in the military because you're there day in and day out, and basic training is like 9 months long or 10 months long, right? And or a year. I don't
It's
know how
it's
long is
it's
basic training.
13 weeks.
That's it for basic.
Yes, but it seems longer at times. Uh, but
Okay. Well,
everyone
that's not
goes through the
explaining it very
hardship.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's okay. So you have boot camp, then you have soldier qualification, then you have your course. So you might like my course was over a year,
Yep.
right? And then you have to think that soldier qualification is 4 weeks, and then you have the 3 months prior. So technically, to be fully qualified for me was over like a year and a half. And in between that, after that, I remastered to another trade. So it was another 3 months, and they have qualification level 3 and then qualification level 5, which if you want to look at it, it's like your constable and senior constable,
Yeah.
right? And then with promotion, you can have other course, but um, you're all stuck together and you have no choice. So this is the other thing that I was very surprised with the policing world. Um, if I tell you you're AO, I'll still work with you. I'm going to be just very honest. I don't like you but you and
Mhm.
I have to work together
Yeah.
to complete our task. Now, what I saw in the police world here is I don't like him. We're not going to back him up. And I was like, what are you talking about? We're not backing him up. He's one of us. Yeah, I don't like him. So I'm not going. Or the guy will, and the guy, because at that point was a man, take the call and take the longest road to get there. So the backup gets there first and their primary officer on it.
Yeah.
I've seen guys sleeping, like shutting off their car in the dark, waiting for stolen car because they want to get to that specialty unit. And to get there, they need to hunt cars. Meanwhile, everyone works and this guy doesn't take his load of it.
Yeah.
Right. Or I've seen like the son of a detective who just take a BNE, one BNE a day, break and enter for the ones who don't understand that, and will sit and work like throughout. Meanwhile, you need to take 13 calls a day. Everyone takes 13, every car takes 13 calls a day except him. And nobody talks. And that's the difference. That's the biggest difference. Nobody talks because if you say something, you're called and you're gonna be told you're doing harassment. If in the military you're called a CUNT and it's not called harassment, this is life, my friend. You just
Yeah.
keep on going, you get insulted, and you keep on digging your trench. That's it. That's all. There's no like, oh, I have feelings, which I found that the police world had so many of them, and it's bias. Um, I seemed like I hated the job. I hated the culture. I
Yeah.
loved helping people. I loved going to that mental health call where that person wanted to kill herself in that case, like one of them I have in mind, and making sure that she sees that the glass is half full, not half empty. And
Hmm.
then going to the hospital because they have better support there with her. Um, that was the good part. Whenever, whatever that was related to the culture, no way. But that would have never happened. You know what I mean? In the military, I've seen that in special force. I've seen a guy who cheated, like his buddy was deployed, and one of the guys slept with his wife. He got fired.
Yeah. You'd never see that in the policing world.
I'm gonna go with an example I have here of the service I worked at. There's a sergeant who sent his constable to a call, and he went and slept with his wife.
Yeah.
Right? And you would expect that the surgeon get in trouble. No. So the constable knock him out. Little punch in the face. I think he deserved way more. Guess what happened? The service charged the constable with police assault.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot stand by that. There's no way in
Yeah.
hell.
Well, we're getting in like, oh
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
I guess we would end up having like a 3 hour
Oh
discussion
no,
on
yeah.
this
So,
if we took all these tracks, John. But
but
this is the
go
this is the
back, right?
reality, though.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
the reality.
totally.
It's just void.
But
If
it's
you
not
don't,
talk
if
about.
you
Yeah.
don't, yeah, if you don't play that non-familial nepotistic game that everybody sort of falls into, you're an outsider. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the way the policing world is from coast to coast. And I hear this from every single person
Yeah.
who dares to be authentic or who dares to say that they're unwell or who dares to speak out to tell another officer that they're being a jerk, because the moment you do, you're a rat.
Yeah.
And so the support network within the policing world is sorely lacking. And this is the number one thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of the military world. And
So the military, the chain of command, is not so prepared either to deal with it because they're normal people, right? The fact that we're
yeah,
normal people dealing with mental health isn't always easy. So, like, we don't have training as soldier or policing, I think, to fully deal in depth with one of your subordinates having issues, right? I remember
yeah,
the day that I called off. I tried to call my sergeant, and he was just promoted. He was a good guy. He was one of the good sergeant, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't put out a word of my mouth. So I'm like, I'm gonna write on the CAD, right, in the computer, and I wrote on computer, I'm coming to see you. He's like, well, I want to talk to you. So good thing. I'm like, okay, great. I'm in trouble on top of it. I cannot speak, and I'm in trouble. So when I sat in front of him, I had like a pure on. I never had that before. A pure on panic, where the breathing was kind of so mixed out, and tears and whatnot. And I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Um, And I guess that was my breakthrough of realizing that something is totally off. But he didn't know what to do. He's like, well, go home, come back tomorrow. And I was like, I don't think tomorrow is going to be fine either. But yeah, sure. Right. Let's go home. Now, dealing with this, it's the aftermath that we're here to talk about. And this is what we're going to chat. The aftermath is, what do we do when we talk to our insurance? So number one, when you pull out your injury as a mental health injuries, there's a bunch of process to go through, bunch of form to go through. And I believe that we are not mentally apt to fill out those forms. I know when I did the Veterans Affair here, the VA, my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm filling out the paper because I want to be protected. That's kind of the only thing I was thinking. My family, right? Family has to be protected if something happened
Yep.
to me. And she's like, you're not mentally fit to write any of this. And the person at Veterans Affairs has no clue who the hell I am, that I call it the 1-800 number, cannot help me, right?
Yep.
So that's your case manager. And the case manager there don't have really training. They only need a degree to be hired. It doesn't have to be a degree in administration, logistics, mental health, anything. You can have a degree in massage therapist and you're in.
Yep.
The Veterans Affairs of Canada do not hire, let's say, NCOs who are chief, which is a high rank, one of the highest rank of the NCOs, because they don't have a degree. Although this person would know best,
Yeah.
right? Like would know the culture and everything. They don't.
Well, yeah, I think insurance companies like for me, it's in Ontario, it's called WSIB. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's similar to
Yeah.
what it would be called, or WCB,
Yeah.
Workman's Compensation. That's what
Mhm.
everybody says. Um, they're a necessary evil, and I see this in a few ways. There are people that work for WSIB in Ontario who mean well and are compassionate and empathetic people.
Mhm.
And then there are some people who do the job because it's a job and it's a paycheck and they don't care.
Mhm.
And so like what you're saying, you're trying to fill out paperwork, and yet, and I remember back when I first started to have to deal with all this paperwork, I was just inundated. And here I just walked away from my employer, just dealing with the worst part of my mental health trauma, and now I had to do all this paperwork in order to continue being paid. And
Yeah.
it's a back and forth to the doctor and the insurance company. Like I said, you might have a case manager that's empathetic to the situation and nice, or you might have somebody with a chip on their shoulder who's collecting a paycheck and they just don't care. And I've experienced both of those. So we pay into these insurance companies such that we can be off work and have the opportunity to heal properly. So I don't want to shit on them too much because they have continued to pay me and I've paid into taxes for that reason.
Yep.
But at the same time, you one of the things that I think people need to know is that you have to develop a pretty thick hide. You need to have leathery skin when it talks to dealing with insurance companies, especially when it comes to mental health trauma or any injury that you've sustained on the job, because
Yep.
at the end of the day, they've been corporatized. They may not be a for-profit organization, but somebody's making money.
Oh
And
yeah.
people at the top are making money and they're incentivized to not pay. I mean, what insurance company would be incentivized to pay every claim? They'd be bankrupt, right? There's a reason why you have to jump through hoops, and there's a reason why you have to fill out 75 pieces of paper and continually be, up to date with everything that you're doing with them, is because they don't want to pay you. And ultimately they do want to get you back to work. And I can
Yep.
understand that. I mean, we don't want everybody to be off work because everybody's got a hangnail. So I can understand where they're coming from. So that's why I'm saying you have to have some thick skin and you have to see it as a game you play.
So okay,
And
so let me shoot you that then. So I agree and
sure.
disagree, but let's go with I agree most of what you just said, because I
Yep.
don't want to agree to with you just create chaos. Um, how do we fix it? Okay, so because I
Yeah.
mean we could talk about all the crap that we went through, and I mean you and I we talked about it before. I think we could have like a 24 beer and just go with it each. Um, the truth is what we need in this is not only ruminate into the crap, but figure it out how to fix it.
Yeah.
So from your own perspective of what you've been through with WCB, or your service, what would be the good way of fixing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Whew. I think number one is, like I said, I think you have to recognize that it's a game that's being played.
Mhm.
For the insurance company, you're another sort of a number or a piece of paper within that bureaucracy, within those rules.
Mhm.
And you've got staff members dealing with you that just may or may not like you. And it's no offense to anybody. It's just the way we are. You know, there's lots of people we talk with that they don't particularly care for you. And they don't care if you lose your job, and they don't care if you lose your paycheck, and they don't care about your mental health or your physical health. So you have to play a game. And
Then
the
that
game in
person
this,
should not be at work.
you're right, they shouldn't, John, but that's the way life is, right? Because we
Mhm.
don't also get to choose the employees that we deal with all the time. And the game that you're playing is take care of you as best you can, and don't give them an inch of rope to hang you with. And I had to learn how to speak to the insurance company, because you slip the tongue, you say something, and they'll immediately take the real raw definition of that, and they'll come back to you to try and tell you that you're okay now. And I'll give you an example of the real world example of this. The I don't know, about 4 months ago, I was talking to my case manager, and I said something about how my days are very much like Groundhog Day, because it's every day I'm at home doing the same kind of thing. She phoned my psychologist and started to request some return to work information because I was at home bored, quote unquote. And when my doctor phoned me and said, apparently you told WSIB that you're bored, I thought back for a moment. Number one, I don't say the word bored. Anybody who lives in this house, including my wife and my children, know I don't say those words. Bored is not something I like to say out loud.
You have a farm.
I
How can you be bored on a?
Yeah. Well, I have a life. How could you be bored with life,
Yeah.
beyond having a farm? But there's no way I said that to her. But what I said was my days were like Groundhog Day. So she took it to mean that I was bored and that I needed something to do. That's not even close to what I meant.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the game is, if you're dealing with an insurance company, and this is what I think, you have to play the game properly. You have to look out for you,
Mhm.
and you have to know that the person on the other end of the phone may not and probably does not have your best interest in place or at heart. And it's up to you. The responsibility is up to you, the person who has been hurt, to ensure that both your insurance provider and your employer
Mhm.
are not giving you a raw deal, and that you're being treated with the utmost unfairness, and that you're giving yourself enough time to heal properly without feeling like there's a pressure, because you will start to feel that pressure. And we
Yeah.
talked about this in a previous episode, and you talked about it earlier. There's that compassion fatigue that comes with certain people, and some of those people are going to be your employer and your insurance provider because they don't want to keep paying you. And
Yeah.
I 100% appreciate that. I can understand from a financial and an economic standpoint that you wouldn't want to be just paying out people because they're more comfortable being at home now. But there's a level of empathy that needs to be built into these programs, especially when it comes to mental health trauma, where there's certain language that should be used and some that shouldn't be. And I think that there should be a lot of training that goes into these insurance providers when they've got
Bingo.
people on the phone there to dealing with your life. I mean, this is, if I don't fill out this paperwork, and I just recently got one in the mail. If I don't fill out these paperwork and provide my T4 and my T2202 and all of my financial assessments, they'll cut me off.
Mhm.
So that's part of the game I have to play with them. There's no point in getting mad at it. There's no point in freaking out and losing your mind over what the insurance provider is going to do. You just make sure you play your game, and you don't let them create rules that you don't abide by, because ultimately the power does lie with you and with your doctor. And
Yeah.
so folks out there that are listening to this, if they are, that's the number one thing, is play your game and take care of you. And I mean, I want you now to talk about, what do you think we need to do within the employment service? Like, what do we need to do to make the policing world better for the staff? Because it's not the road to mental readiness. That's that's a CYA checkbox, like you said. That's what that is.
Mhm.
The real thing that supports people is the brothers and sisters. So what do we do, John? What's your answer to that?
So the reason I said at first it has to come from the top. When I put my I left the police system, the WSIB, if you wish, on my side, where I was making a six figure, to go to a five figure with the military, right? And a drop of roughly 50 some, 60 some $1,000. And don't get me wrong, with the state of the world right now, I would need that $60,000 like without a doubt, right? My wife has
Mm-hmm.
to work more and so on and so forth. And but it was better for my health. Now, I put my resignation to the service of police, to the chief, and so on and so forth, with the fact that I was going with Veterans Affairs because they are more aware of what mental health is. I mean, they've been dealing with PTSD, the trench sickness. I mean, they have so many names since the First World War that has been used, and so on and so forth, and even before. So it's been dealing with it. And I mean, the VA exists for what now? Since 1970, I think, or roughly like this. So the experience with it is greater. They have also more programs and so on and so forth. So I think first thing first, we have to not reinvent the wheel. If something works somewhere,
Yeah.
let's use it. But what I want to bring up too is I receive a card. I reached out to our RSM, to our regimental surgeon major. He told me what to do, send my letter to whatever HR, tell me that he would put my badge in a epoxy, whatever triangle thing that I have somewhere in the world in my house for my kids. And that's it. And then I received probably 2 months later, and I explained why in my resignation later, why would I leave? So there had been investigation against me saying that I was a fraud because I wrote a book about mental health. And that
Mm-hmm.
book, it was about how I went through my hell. Um, it was my own therapy, right? So they ask, like what you just said, T4 and so on. And they even said, well, we want to know exactly how the book brought you. And I'm like, I'm a cop, right? I'm still a cop. I might be injured and crazy, but I'm still a cop. You need a warrant for this, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can provide you my T4, but my book was under an Incorp business. I'm like, I'm not providing this. You need a warrant to access the business documentation. Um, and I received a letter from the chief, like a card. It was a cheap card with whatever the badge of our service on front, and say, "Good luck for your future endeavor." I cannot work, man. I,
Mm-hmm.
as a person at 37, I can't work in a normal setting. And what I mean by normal setting is an 8 to 4. My brain is at the point where it's not possible to be sitting in a chair for 8 to 4. You're gonna see me dissociate. And now
Mm-hmm.
it's been 5 years I'm off. So not that the things won't change 10 years from now, but that's where the state I'm at now. Right. And you and I will try to sometimes plug our podcast, and I'll call you probably or text you like a few hours prior. I'm like, no, not a good day, man. I'm out. Um, so first, what we need, and I think it'd be very, very important, right? I think everyone who works whatever at insurance or Veterans Affair need to be trained for, let's say, injuries, physical injuries. I mean, I think it makes sense,
Yeah.
and probably half of them should be trained to be working with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
There is a language, a vocabulary to use, and so on and so forth, right? Now, same as with WSIB, WCB, the worker compensation board, I think they should have people to deal with just first responder. We
I agree.
don't speak the same language there. We don't. And I'm going to go further than this. As cops, we dealt with liars every single day. So
Yeah.
if I hear on the other end of the phone, oh, I really care about your state, and I know it's BS, I'm going to call you out on it. And then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be offended and you're going to not like this and so on and so forth. But that's kind of the reality, right? Like, so we need to have people who are a bit more trained. They don't need to be a psychologist, but they need to understand what can happen to it. The second thing that they need to be trained on is what is the sickness, whatever that is, right? Mental health as a whole, right? As PTSD, depression, anxiety, and so on and so forth. What is the side effect of those?
Yeah.
Because those will affect your physical, right? You and I gain an amount of weight that is insane. I lost my libido. It was not lifting at 32 years old.
Yeah.
It's not normal, right? But I
Yeah.
had no idea until I started to read and figured out what was going on. And my wife was extremely upset, right? Because, well, he's not caring for me anymore. But it's not, I don't care about her. I was so ashamed that that was not working. The intimacy was not working, that I just shut my mouth, shut down. What about grinding your teeth? Right? You go to a doctor, you go to a dentist, and they say, well, there's something here like chipping off. What about like you're snoring? Well, okay, that's sleep apnea. There's a lot of first responder military sleep a few hours a night for decades on, right? What about IBS? How many cops do you know that have a problem in the bathroom? Right? We all say a joke that, oh my God, that belt when you remove it.
Yeah.
It's not because you have to rush it. It's because you have a problem with your bowel movement. Because at times you were so stressed that you clogged it, and then it release and everything goes, right? But that's related to PTSD, that's related to anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And those are other claims that rolls around. So you need to have a person who's aware of that. So that training has to be done.
Yeah.
And to top it off, in my own thoughts, as a supervisor of case manager, if I look at it and I see one who seemed to not give a flying F, well, it needs to be talked about, because you are talking to a bunch of people who are vulnerable. And if they
Yeah.
have a bad day, I mean, I think it's last year, 2 years ago, Ottawa had a detective who just went to work, used his own gun, and blew up his head in their main district, the HQ, right?
Yeah.
It was awful to read about it. I have a friend last year. We're almost a year and a week, who passed right from the military, and it just goes so fast. Um, so if we have those people who care, because you need to have a genuine care. I think that's the biggest thing. You want to go as, and it's same as nurse, right? Most of the nurse really, really, really care. But we both
Yeah.
saw some nurses who are so fed up with the BS around of the system that it overflow into their job,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think in all those uniform, because we give so much to people that we forget ourselves, our own person to take care of us, we need to have as well a system that helps us retrieve that. And it cannot be
Yeah.
just the psychologist. And one of the things that helps, and we talked about that, the peer group support is fantastic, but can be also negative, right? Because you need to have, number one, someone who's in charge of it, who's trained, right? I love my peer group support, but the guy was there every time we had a military guy coming in. I was the only other military guy. He's like, just open your bag, tell about your story, and so on and so forth. I was re-traumatizing myself by telling my entire story all over again, so he or she feels good. So we need to have as well those people who are trained for this. It cannot be a flip of the switch.
Yeah.
In Ontario and Alberta now, right, we have boots on the ground. And I think it's a fantastic idea. Those people are trained to answer the phone, to listen to you, and talk with you. And they've been in that situation before because they wore a uniform.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful initiative. Thank God it exists. But what else can we do? Because when you're mentally unfit, I don't know for you, but I've seen a lot of people like this. You don't want to do physical activities.
Yeah.
Like if this doesn't work, the rest is not following suit. So what do we do with this? Well, we need to be, there needs to be an understanding. And the problem that I've seen with the insurance side of the thing was every 6 weeks, we need a new assessment to see if you can go back to work. You cannot fix something that took you 15 years to hit a wall at 200K an hour to be fixed in 6 weeks.
Yeah. I agree.
You
Yeah.
can't. And my second last psychologist. Let's go with that. He brought me a good example, and I love it. And what he said is, he's like, everyone who end up with PTSD are usually the equivalent to a muscle car. He's like, those muscle car are freaking great on a straight line, and they can fly, right? Like, let's go back in 2000 when Fast and Furious, he goes in his back wheels and flies.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, they're awful at taking a curve, though. And when it's time
Mm.
to take a curve, they take the ditch or hit a tree. And I love this example because that's kind of what happened for me, right? Let's go. We go fast, 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 fast. Bring up. I left the military. The next day, I was in policing. Keep on going. We're gonna keep pushing. Move 4,000 kilometers away. For the U.S. people, 2,600 miles away from home. And my wife stayed back home for 7 months. Then she moved with us. Hated the house. Now I have to deal with a wife who hates my house because she didn't want to fly in to shop with me. A new job and a new experience, and so on and so forth. So, you juggle with a lot.
Yep.
And at one point, life would tell you, well, you didn't take your time. So I'm going to put a wall. And I think the first wall might be a sheet of paper thick. The second wall will be a gyprock. The third wall is brick. Now try to run towards a brick wall. It hurts. And that's
Yeah.
when PTSD kicks in, or
Yeah.
depression, or whatever we're gonna bring up. But I think we need to have, because we have fantastic psychologists. But have you realized that they will never send you to a psychologist who never dealt with first responder problem or military for a good
Hmm.
reason? So if they do that at professional level to take care of your mind, why don't we do it for the case manager side of things?
Yeah. Yeah, I
I,
agree. I think that's the I don't know if that's the only point for insurance companies and how they can improve, but I definitely think that that's the right track. I don't think that training is the right word when it comes to support or lack of support in an employee, like in a police service, because I don't think a person needs to be trained in order to be more compassionate. I think what they need to do is have compassion. They need to have empathy, and I don't know how you train that into people. So I want to go back to a couple of things.
yeah.
When you brought up the R2MR training, the road to mental readiness, I remember the first time I attended that years ago when it first came out. And there was about 50 of us that were attending this thing. And we did the little slideshow, and there was two presenters. And it was a joke.
Yeah.
The whole thing was a mockery. And everybody sitting in this room, all of us police officers, on like road officers of various ranks, all uniformed personnel, just mocking the road to mental readiness training,
Mm-hmm.
laughing in its face, acting like it's grade 9 and nobody's paying attention to the teacher. We might as well have been shooting spitballs at each other. That's how lame it was, how boring and how awful the presentation was. And I say that honestly, it was terrible. It was like it was thrown together as a CYA. And you got all 48 people that are in there with two trainers just literally not paying attention. So, number one, that happens day in and day out when it comes to training
Mm-hmm.
about mental health. You've got this terrible macho alpha.
Are they really alpha though? Are they
Well,
really alpha?
that well, week. That's a. I mean, that's another. We're already at an hour
Yeah.
here, John. So I want to try and button it up here. But you have a macho alpha
Yeah.
sort of like chest beating kind of um subculture within the policing world, and that subculture does not allow for empathy. So
Yeah.
when we're lacking empathy and we're lacking support uh, at the employer level, that's where the problem is at the basement. It's at the beginning where you're a constable and you're looking out for your brothers and sisters beside you, and you lose that lack of support because of the really poisonous culture that lives within police world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say this again. Actually, I wrote a point here down, and I want to say it quickly. I was on a podcast a few months ago. I was on the Collective, and Sean Taylor. We were talking about this kind of thing, and I was mentioning how it's really poisonous that we talk about each other in the policing world because we hear about it all the time. Yeah, I know that you've heard this in your own experience, John, when you were a
Mm-hmm.
police officer. Somebody's off sick, and then everybody gets just torn to shreds behind the scenes. You're sitting in the coffee room, and one of the uh, one of the police officers will say something negative about an officer that's off duty. And Sean made a good point. He said, yeah. And the reason why that happens is because nobody else stands up. Nobody else has the balls or the guts to stand up to the bully in the police station. And so we've developed a culture
Mm-hmm.
where nobody opens their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people that are opening their mouths are the assholes. The
Yeah.
only people opening the mouths are the ones that are there spitting out this garbage, and they're saying the awful things, and they're using pejorative language, and they're using gaslighting techniques, and they're talking terrible about the people that need the help the most. And yet these people will come out to a gunfight with you, or they'll back you up in a back alley with a bunch of methed out druggies. But you put your hand up and say you're mentally unwell, and they shred you at the police detachment. And that's the real truth. And I've had a hard time doing that in my life in the past, is actually standing up and calling assholes out in front of other people, because we're not in that kind of culture. And if you do that, you become like the black sheep. You become a rat. You get
Mm-hmm.
singled out for doing that. And so that's a real hard thing to deal with, but it's missing in the culture. And it's
Yeah.
missing for a lot of reasons. And one of the main reasons is we just stopped being truthful. We stopped speaking honestly, and we stopped saying the things that we needed to say. And what needs to be said is that there's bullies among us, and bullies need to be put in their place, and they need to be told that they're assholes in front of everybody else. And everybody needs to start supporting those people instead of supporting the assholes, because you're jumping on that non-familiar nepotistic train in order to try and get something out of your career. And what you're doing is you're throwing people under the bus in order to advance yourselves, because you're promoting that guy's alpha machismo bullshit attitude.
So
And
okay, so I'm gonna go back with this because
yeah.
what you call that person at first was alpha, and then you went on the bully, macho, and so on, and
Mm-hmm.
someone who degrade people for asking for help. I'm gonna
Yeah.
recall this again once more. Is it an alpha?
No, it's not an alpha.
Because if you look at the definition of alpha, and if you go to the wolf, right, the alpha pack, the alpha male and alpha female, take care of the people.
Yeah, they're altruistic.
Bingo,
They're
right?
graceful.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're compassionate. Yeah.
and even the second alpha, so when he's too old, the male, what the new alpha will do, he's the old alpha will be the first one who feed, because they still have
Mm-hmm.
respect for that alpha.
Yeah.
So this is not an alpha, this is a bully, period. Now, is the fear is there 100%? Should people talk 100%? Do they don't? That's life. I've been through it, man. I
Yeah.
was refused courses, and the only course I was able to jump on was how to not have your back broken by the end of your career. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I got called in front of the class. If you don't want to work and look like John, this is the course you apply. And I wanted to say, then approve my other 5 course. Now I'm going to push further than this with the world of policing, just for the fun of it. Most of the people who are recognized for their arrest have to do a physical arrest. And what I mean by this is TAC, right? Or SWAT, if you rather, or it can be drugs, or it can be so on and so forth, whatever that is, physical, undercover, or whatever that is, right? Like those are, well, right now, there's over 50% of our crime that are committed online.
Mm-hmm.
And if um if you want to look at that, oh yeah, my hand. Yeah, that's my sorry. We had a technical issues. So yeah, so I should like, but this is the old mentality. This is where I was super surprised, right? Like I work into cybercrime, and I mean, how many little girls, little boys are actually sold out is insane,
Mm-hmm.
right? And right now in US, there's over 88,000 people, right? They just caught up people in Edmonton with a woman from Toronto who was sold out, and they're already in Edmonton. She was missing for 2 days.
Mm.
So, but those guys are not talked about because it's a little boy culture at times, not for everyone, right? Where, well, I want to be Superman, and Superman has big muscle and will go physically, right? The SWAT guys are awesome, and I have friends who are SWAT. Don't get me wrong, right? But there's other position who you do big things as well. So that big bully, right? It's not an alpha. I don't think so. Sadly, I don't
No,
think it is.
no, I don't think so. I've looked into this lots myself, and I'm gonna finish it off now, John. I hope you
Yep.
don't mind because we're like way beyond
Pass.
our time limit. You're right. I don't think that it's an alpha male that's the one doing this kind of stuff in the policing world. I don't think that it's an alpha male. I don't think that it's a. I don't even think it's a bit. You know, these terms are silly, alpha and beta and whatever. So I'm just going to say, I don't think that you're a good masculine man if you have
Mhm.
to use somebody else as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
I don't think you're a good masculine man if you have to speak about somebody in a negative way when they're not in the room.
Mhm.
I think that you're a coward
Yep.
for speaking negatively about somebody like that. And I think that you are contributing to the potential suicide of somebody by being an asshole behind their back or even to their face. And I've never had that. You know, I've yet to have all these tough guys that talk about me behind my back speak to me into my face. It's always behind my back. Even all of the other men and women that I've worked with who have fallen ill and I've heard how members talk about them, it's never to their faces. This is a cowardly act. And I'll call the cowards out right now because I'm sick and tired of it. You're a coward. You're a coward if you say things behind somebody's back. You're a coward if you use language that's damning and hurtful to somebody who's mentally unwell. And you're a coward if you don't care and lack empathy, thinking that you are impervious to this kind of injury and that you will never be harmed this way.
Mhm.
And so here's how we conclude, because what we talked about was the support or lack thereof coming from the employer and or the insurance company. And I know we rambled a little bit and we kind of got off track, but we're just learning. So here's the takeaway, I think, folks. Empathy rules the day. Empathy gets us all out of hot water because empathy pulls us away from our ego. Empathy attaches understanding to a person, even if you don't know their situation and even if you don't like them. It's just, and I think we've said this a few times on the podcast now. We're all humans. We all have problems. We all have a cup that's just about always full.
Mhm.
And a little tiny bit of compassion and empathy goes a long way. And I
Yeah.
think empathy is the cure to a lot of those police and military suicides when you can reach your hand across the aisle and say, hey, man, it's okay. I get you.
Mhm.
So I want everybody to leave with that. And then this is the final note on the insurance company thing. And then we can say goodbye until the next episode. You got to play your game and you got to look out for you because the insurance provider just might not.
Touche.
So there you go. We've been rambling for an hour and 14. Folks, thank you. If you listened all the way to the end here, thank you very much. We're working on getting better at this. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and what's the other
Be,
one? I don't know.
be the change, man. Be the
Well,
change.
be the change. Yeah. I wish that was a billboard everywhere. You know, I wish maybe we should start wearing that on our uniforms. Be
Yeah.
the change.
Yeah. Maybe. Anyways,
Anyway, folks, we'll catch you next time on the Raven Chronicles with Moonin and Hugin. Peace.
bye.